What's up, everyone? This is ClearPath Podcast, episode 4. I'm Max Chang. With me, as always, my good friend Nick Lombardo. Today's date is January 14th, and we're here to talk about the huge news that happened yesterday, which is the James Harden trade to the Nets. Nick, what are your initial thoughts about this trade?
A lot of pieces, a lot of players and picks moving. I know we waited an extra day to record it just in case there were any fallout trades from it. I think a lot of teams got better in this. And it's kind of interesting to see the way that different GMs value different pieces in this, especially deciding between whether you want Jared Allen or whether you want a future Bucks first round pick that could be nothing. It's just interesting to see how different players and different picks were valued in this. So I'm really excited to get to talking about it.
Yeah, I think that shockingly, there's a lot of merit for every single team that was involved. I don't necessarily think there's that big of a loser in like for any team. So yeah, that's interesting in that respect. But we can kind of break down what we think about each team's haul. Do you want to just talk about the obvious first and Harden to the Nets? What do you think?
Yeah. So I know there's been a lot made about Harden and everything that's going on around it. I think for Brooklyn, this ends up being a trade you probably have to do. In terms of giving up all the picks they gave up, it's 3 unprotected picks and 4 swaps.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason they did this, I think, at the end of the day, is because they're not sure what's going on with Kyrie. There's a chance that Kyrie could just retire, that he could just not play this season, that he could sit out for the playoffs. Like we've seen from the years past, that Kyrie isn't a guy you can really rely on. I think at the end of the day, the Nets looked at this and they said, we have Kevin Durant in his prime right now. We don't know what's going on with Kyrie. Let's get another all-NBA player. And I think at the end of the day, even though the picks are going to be tough, I think you had to do this trade for Harden. You know, they'll all the players. So the way it's breaking down right now is Harden, Kyrie, and Durant all have player options for the 2022-2023 season. So after that season, there's no guarantee that they will have any of those players. And so after that, you're still giving up 3, maybe 4 first-round picks where you have no guarantee that you could have those players on your team. So that is a huge risk. However, this makes them, in my eyes, the favorite in the East this year to come out and play the Lakers.
Yeah.
And this gives you Kyrie insurance. Just in case Kyrie goes out and does whatever he wants, you still have Harden next to Durant.
Yeah, I think that like my personal opinion about the picks is that initially you'll hear like 8 first round picks and you'll be like really scared about it. But when you really break down like what the picks are, so the 2021 pick swap, it's gonna mean nothing, right? Because 100% the Rockets are gonna finish with a worse record than the Nets this season. So like that's basically you're gonna keep your pick. So that's not a big deal. 2022, you can probably project that they'd be pretty good considering all 3 of them are going to be there, including and also I think even like 2023 is a pick swap. Like that's kind of debatable how good that.
Swap.
Yeah, so like how good that's going to be. So it's kind of like 3 of those picks you're not that worried about, and then the 2022 from Milwaukee, obviously that's not yours, so you don't care about. So I would say like 4 of these first round picks are probably going to be in the mid-20s. You know, if the Nets win the championship in the 30s or in the 30th pick. So I don't know if it's like the haul from face value versus what it actually is. Like I wouldn't be that concerned. Obviously, losing Durant, Kyrie, and Harden would be bad. But yeah, I think what you hit on is the most is that in like a COVID season, and we've seen this with like the Sixers and the Celtics and all these teams that have missed or postponed games because of players being out. Like having like 2 of the top 8 players, like if Kyrie and KD got COVID, Harden can still win you games on his own. So that would mean a lot. Like we've already seen this year that KD was out for 4 straight games because of COVID protocols. And that just makes it so much harder for the Nets. But now you have Harden, you can still win against teams that you should be beating and not worry about your standing as much. Which they don't have a good record right now, which is objective, you know. I think they're like around 500.
Yeah, so I mean, this definitely gives you insurance in that sense, in that you could put out one of Harden or Durant. Some nights even just having Kyrie out there, and you have a good chance to win that game regardless of who the other players on the court are.
Yeah.
Where it ties you up is even when you get to that 2022-2023 season, Harden's going to be 33. Kyrie's going to be 30 and Durant's going to be 34. So you're faced with the tough decision of, are you going to pay these three guys who are all going to be past their age 30 season? Are you going to pay them for the next couple of years? Because that in itself is a risk. But if you don't pay them, then there's probably no path to championship contention for the next 4 years after that because you don't have your picks.
Mm-hmm.
But you can win a championship this year, then everyone kind of forgets about that and you kind of move on, you figure it out. And you do things similar to what the Cavs are doing, where you take on some distressed assets, you work around the picks you have and you can figure something out. I'm sure if you asked anyone in Cleveland, they would say it's fine that they've struggled for the past 3 or 4 years because they did get that one championship.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, you got to do it. Where this team, I think this team is the favorite in the East. Their depth is getting a little bit hairy, especially when you match against the Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
Now that DeAndre Jordan is the only center on that team who has any NBA experience at all, I think losing Jared Allen makes it really tough for you to match up with AD and LeBron in the next round because you really lose a lot of your size. I mean, the next biggest guy is Jeff Green on their roster right now, who really has
Nick Claxton.
Unless you'd like Claxton.
I like Claxton.
What do you think about the Nets' depth right now? And a lot of it's been made about their defense as well, about their defense maybe slipping up too. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think before this trade, the Nets had one of the deepest rosters in the league. I mean, think about they lost their starting, I guess, two guard or point guard in Dinwiddie, whatever you want to call them. And they were still like, they could just put LeVert in there and they were 100% exactly fine. That says a lot about how deep they were. But now when you're looking at the roster, like last night, there was no Kyrie, it was just KD. KD had like 30, and then Bruce Brown had 15 points and 14
Bruce
rebounds.
Brown's okay. He's okay.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So
you're relying on Shamet now. Like Shamet is going to play a big role for this team in the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's Luau Cabarrot too. He's okay.
They're like fine role players, but they definitely are going to need to pick up some dudes from the G League or sign some free agents. I'm not really sure who's out there right now, but they clearly don't have any moves left, I'd say. So this is kind of it. I would be really concerned at the 5. I think that sneakily, like the really good teams all have pretty good centers. Like in the East, Embiid, there's Jokic, AD obviously is a big problem. Like that can be a problem given certain matchups. Like I just don't know who would guard Embiid for this team, which would scare me.
I agree. So they have a couple of moves left to make. They have their mid-level exception of $5.7 million. They have the minimum exceptions they could do. So if someone buys out, wants to come join their team for the minimum, and then they're probably going to be able to get the disabled player exception from Spencer Dinwiddie getting hurt. So they have moves that they can make to add marginal players. It's going to be a question of what center is going to be available in the buyout market at that point. But I think at the end of the day, you had to make this move, because you didn't watching that Nets team last night. They're fine, but you're not winning a championship with just KD, and Kyrie is nothing right now. You don't know if he's going to be back or anything.
Yeah, even pulled up. Oh, sorry. You can go. You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, even though this team, the defense may be a problem because they don't really have any above average players besides Durant. However, I think to use Harden's defense at the start of the season against him is kind of unfair because he was clearly on a team that he didn't care about, that he didn't want to play on.
Yeah, but
so Harden's not an elite defender, but he'll be better, right? He'll try, hopefully.
He'll be better, but it's not like before this he was a great defender. You know what I'm saying? Like
I agree. I don't think before this the Nets were all that great of a team. So here's my one thing about the trade. Well, besides that, did you have to give up 8 picks? Could you have maybe got down to like 6 or 7 and saved yourself 2 years? That it's hard to say. I mean, but did you have to give up Jared Allen? I think that's the biggest. Did you have to give up Jared Allen because he's not even going to the Rockets? He's going to the Cavs. Was this like a DeAndre Jordan kind of thing that they wanted to make DeAndre feel better and have the only player?
No,
I would feel a lot better about this team if they had Jared Allen. But it seems like they rerouted him for, I don't know, because the Rockets wanted Dante Exum and over him.
I think the pick. I think it was the pick. And just before we go into this, I just wanted to point out a couple of big men I have that are available right now as like free agent options. And we're looking at Jordan Bell, Dragon Bender, Jonah Bolden. Besides that, like people they could sign like Corey Brewer maybe, Damari Carroll. Like it's not looking great. Like I guess Tyson Chandler. So it's slim pickings out here in terms of what they have as an option from the big man. I'm sure we'll see somebody get signed. But yeah, I don't know. We could talk about that too. That's like a little bit weird. I don't I think like when it comes down to negotiating whether or not it's 6 picks or 8 picks, like at the end of the day, if you really want Harden, like the Rockets have all the leverage there, right? Like they're gonna be like, we're just gonna take Philadelphia's offer or whatever, and you just have to give them 8 picks. So I don't really fault them for that. But yeah, losing Jared Allen for a Milwaukee 2022, I find it so hard to believe that he's worth a Milwaukee 2022. That just seems ridiculous to me. He's been great this season. He starts center for them. He's a good defensive option.
Yeah, I mean, he's 11 points and 10 rebounds, coming off the bench for a good portion of the season too, and then recently starting over DeAndre. Yeah. I think that's really tough. LeVert, like you're not too worried about LeVert when you get Harden. I think that was always kind of like an extra piece for them where it was nice to have him, but it wasn't. Yeah. But it's tough to lose Jared Allen because now you're really relying on DeAndre who's definitely past a point in his career where he's not as effective as he is. But I think also there's something to be said about this team's defense being a little bit better because if you have Harden and Durant out there, right, neither of those two guys has to play as hard offensively. Like you can take off a little bit of effort there and put in a little bit more effort defensively when the playoffs when it gets tough in the playoffs. And I also think we have to remember that James Harden is a top 5 NBA player, probably, right?
Yeah.
Top 5, top 8, whatever you want to put him as.
Exactly. Yeah.
And his biggest deficiency and knock on him was his performance in the playoffs. Well, now you have two guys on this team, two guys, hopefully, if Kyrie comes back, who are very proven at making the last shot in the playoffs. So now you've gotten rid of your biggest problem with Harden and turning over the team to Harden is that you're a little nervous about him in the last 2 minutes of a tight playoff game. But now you have Durant and now you have Kyrie who can, take that last shot for him. And you have Harden for the other 46 minutes of offense like that. I think that's perfect for them. And I think no other team in the East really has the offensive firepower to be able to match them in a 7-game series. If they have all three of those guys like firing on all cylinders, I don't know what team can outscore them. Now, if they only have Harden and Durant, then it becomes a little bit more dicey because then I think you don't have all of the offense you may need. And if the defense is struggling, then maybe one of those teams can beat them. But
I think that if we're just looking on paper, this is one of the greatest big threes of offense that we've ever seen. I think that you don't even have to say these. There's no team in the league that can stop this team fully healthy, full stop. Genuinely, I don't think it. I mean, like Harden is clearly one of the at least top 10 greatest offensive players of all time. I would say he's probably top 5. Same with Durant.
They're in the same. The greatest.
Yeah, both of them are completely unstoppable. Kyrie has hit multiple game-winning shots in his career, like you said. So I'm not worried about that end. But what I am worried about is that it's like the reason the Lakers were good last year is you had AD and LeBron that were monsters on offense. You didn't really need to worry about their offense. But Frank Vogel coached the team to a top 5 defensive team. And in the playoffs, they were a great defensive team. They stopped everyone. But Steve Nash and his lead assistant, who is Mike D'Antoni, are not known for their defense, right? Like, you don't need D'Antoni, who also, I was thinking about this. How does D'Antoni feel about getting fired from the Rockets? Getting Harden. I'm not sure how he feels. But you don't need, like, Steve Nash and D'Antoni, who are, like, offensive geniuses to coach a team that, like, me and you could coach this team and they'd score 140, They need a coach that knows something on defense. And I'm not saying that, like, they are stupid on defense. I'm just saying that like it's a lot. It's an overkill. Like, are you expecting to be like a better version of the Nuggets where you're just gonna outscore everyone like 150 a game? It seems kind of unreasonable.
I think this team's ultimate identity when they're playing against some of the better teams in the East, probably save the Sixers with Embiid, is I think they probably end up putting Jeff Green in for DeAndre Jordan and they close with Kyrie, Harden, Joe Harris, Durant, Jeff Green. You switch everything 1 through 5, so that helps out a little bit. Jeff Green's not a plus defender either, but that team can just score. Like, they're a shoot. Every single person you need to run out and like guard them shooting. And I mean, that's kind of been the Nets' identity this year, is they're not super worried about defense. They, are scorers. They're going to try and outscore you. They're going to try and outgun you.
I mean, Durant
I think
was really
you can
good
do
on
it.
defense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I think you can do it.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that it just puts a lot of pressure now on Durant to be kind of who he was for Golden State when they were really good on defense, kind of playing the 5 in crunch time and being long and athletic, which is, I think he can do it, but it's just a lot to ask of a dude who just came back from an Achilles injury. I would just be really nervous about that kind of stuff. But who knows? Like, I like Nick Claxton a lot. I think he's like a sneaky winner from this trade. Like, he's just going to be getting a lot more minutes he wasn't before. And if he turns out to be good for this team, then they're not going to miss Jared Allen. So
I think they're a move away. I think they still need to use that mid-level and that disabled player exception to hopefully get some kind of center. Yeah, some kind of buyout center. If they can get that, a guy who could play a little bit of defense and do some rebounding, basically what Jared Allen did for them. If you can get a guy like that, I think this team, there's no reason that this team shouldn't win the East this year.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, you want to move on to someone else, another team that.
Yeah, let's go to the Pacers. Let's hit the Pacers.
All right, let's go to the Pacers. So I think this is a good example of exactly what we were talking about in the beginning about like philosophies, about what teams' different philosophies are, right? So the Pacers lose Victor Oladipo, who's on an expiring deal. He was, he's on an expiring deal. I think 21 million.
Yep.
And they're getting Karis LeVert and also a second round pick, which basically means nothing. But LeVert is locked up for 3 years at $16 million a year. So they have a young ass. He's not that young. He's 26, but he's young enough.
He's 2 years younger than Oladipo.
Yeah, and I think that what it comes down to is that you don't really want to re-sign Oladipo. You're not sure about his long term. And although LeVert has had injury history, you have him at a relatively good number, and he's giving you the majority of what Oladipo gave you. Like, he's not as good as a defender, but I think offensively they're very, very similar. And that's just a plus move for the Pacers, a team that isn't like a free agent destination, and you're not even sure if you could re-sign Oladipo. Getting a guy like LeVert is actually like a good win for them because they'll have stability, and he fits their timeline a lot better with Sabonis and Brogdon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it makes the team significantly better, but I think it makes sense from an organizational point of view, right? Like, you get a little bit younger, that's not a huge deal. I think the bigger deal for them was you get LeVert at a much more manageable number than what you would have had to pay Oladipo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you can fully turn the team over to Brogdon. It's not Oladipo and Brogdon trying to, take possessions from the other one at the end. Now it's very clearly, hey, this is Malcolm Brogdon's team. And you pretty much get 95% of Oladipo's production from LeVert. Oladipo this season was 24-6 on 42, 36, 73. LeVert is 18, 6, and 4 on 44, 35, 77. So basically the same numbers. I think Oladipo is a better defender, but their defensive win shares and defensive box plus minus are basically identical this season. So I think overall for the Pacers, like, this is a move that while you might be losing the talent a little bit more, I think it would have been hard for them to sign Oladipo. There were already kind of rumblings that he wanted out of Indiana.
Yeah.
And now I think it's just a happier team. It's a team that makes a little bit more sense. You can have LeVert there. I imagine they probably bring him off the bench and have, him be like kind of the bench scorer for them. And I think that's still a good team.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on everything. I'm not sure what his role is for them, but like, clearly this is Sabonis and Brogdon's team now, and think what happens when you're Oladipo and you had a career year with Indiana before you got injured. You kind of always feel like you're trying to get that form back, like kind of like a Gordon Hayward kind of situation where he gets injured and then all of a sudden Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum emerge, and it's hard for him to be like the fifth option or the fourth option on the team. Kind of same thing happened to Oladipo where he went out and then they got Brogdon and Sabonis became an all NBA player, and it's hard for him to kind of become the third option on this team. So, and LeVert is much better in that role, although I will say I'd be wary I'm sure he thinks that now this is kind of a new place for him to thrive. So in terms of chemistry, I don't know. But I mean, they've had a great start to the season. They look really, really strong. If Sabonis and Brogdon can keep this up, they are a sneaky contender in the East too. And that's another team that would have a lot of trouble. The Nets would have a lot of trouble with just with Sabonis. Like this is what I'm saying. There's a lot of talented bigs in the East, and it's not as clear cut as I think you would want it to be for the Nets.
Yeah, the only reason I say LeVert off the bench is because the past, like this season and the season before, his usage rate has been around 30%, which is pretty high for a player.
Yeah.
So I think putting him in that starting lineup with Brogdon, Warren when he comes back, Sabonis, and Turner might be a little bit too many. Like, yeah, I think you probably get the same problem you had with Oladipo there. So they might end up closing with LeVert. I think that probably makes sense for them.
Yeah.
But in terms of staggering the minutes between Brogdon and LeVert, that way you always have one ball handler who can score on the floor at all times. I think that makes a lot of sense for them. And I think LeVert would probably be more open to a bench role overall than Oladipo would have been, because Oladipo kind
100%.
of still thinks he's an all-star. So
Yeah, I agree. Okay.
It's a move that makes sense for them.
It's a move that makes sense for them. Yeah, they didn't really give up anything that crazy for what they got. Let's move on maybe to
Let's do Cleveland first, and then we'll
let's
hit
do
the Rockets
Cleveland.
at the end. Yeah.
All right, yeah. I mean, it's been well documented for us that we've been big fans of Cleveland. Me in particular, I kind of love Cleveland. I like the way they look this year. I think that they once again have found a way to be get a real asset for almost nothing. Like they did this last year with Drummond when they kind of just stole him from the Pistons. They gave like I think 2 second-round picks and a couple expirings. Like it was nothing. And now I don't think Drummond's good for this team, but I do think that he's like an asset that can get moved right now, like logically. And they kind of did the same thing with Allen this time. They gave up a 2022 first-round pick from Milwaukee, which is, as we know, it's going to be a late 20th pick, so not as good as Jared Allen. And they gave up Dante Exum, who does play backup point guard for them, but he's expiring on $9 million. Like he's not that big of a loss. And Jared Allen, I think, should start for them. I think he fits in this team great. They're gonna probably want to sign him. He makes sense with the rest of their core and Sexland with Garland and Sexton. And now they are a team that should be shopping Andre Drummond, which, funnily enough, like the Nets would probably take him right now if they could somehow get the contracts to work. But yeah, like I love this for them. They sneak in a deal that they probably should never be in and get a real asset. And they get a real asset in Allen and Torian Prince, who's like a fine wing, but just gives them depth. Like that doesn't hurt, and they're fine. They're still in the playoff hunt, and it makes them a better team.
I think this is a great trade for them. I think Allen probably fits in better with their backcourt than Andre Drummond is. Drummond, while he does do a lot on the defensive end and he does get a lot of rebounds, they have him initiating a lot of the offense there. They have him kind of it kind of drives me insane when guys like him, and I'm not comparing Drummond to Embiid because obviously they're in different stratospheres, but when those guys like that get the ball and they get the ball at the 3-point line, rather than getting it down lower, maybe at the free throw line or down in the block. When you give those guys the ball, it just looks bad. It looks bad when Drummond is getting the ball at the 3-point line and trying to dribble and take these centers face up. Like it doesn't make a lot of sense for me. And I think when you already have those two guards who can create a lot of offense, you just want a guy who can do the dirty things and you don't have to give him the ball a bunch of the time to post up. So Allen this season is 11 points, 10 rebounds. Drummond is 18 points, 15 rebounds. But Drummond also has a 30% usage rate compared to Allen's, which is just 15%. So you don't need to dump the ball into Jared Allen 3 times to 5 times a game to give him post ups.
Yeah. So
you can let your guards do the work. And I think long-term Drummond doesn't really fit with this team.
No.
I think they'll probably try. I would try and move him at this point and see what you can get back for him. If not, Jared Allen and Drummond are both on expiring contracts, and you could probably get Allen for half the price of Drummond.
Allen's
I think
on
it makes
restricted,
more sense.
Yeah. Allen's restricted, so they'll definitely resign him.
So another player, they also have JaVale McGee on this team who's been playing pretty well for them. So maybe that could be a buyout guy who could go to Brooklyn. That could
I
be
would
an
doubt it.
interesting piece. I think JaVale
They
McGee
could
to
trade him.
Brooklyn would actually be a great move for them.
I
Just a
doubt it, though. I
side
think
note, did you
he's
know
too valuable.
do you know what Andre Drummond's nickname is on Basketball Reference?
Oh my gosh, I've seen they're awful, every single one of these. I have no idea.
They call him the Big Penguin.
That's never
I
a
think
good
it kind
sign.
of fits. It kind of works, right? Like
Yeah.
he like kind of waddles around a little bit. You're like, I don't know if I
Yeah.
really want to give Big Penguin the ball right now, but there he goes, and he's just running towards the rim and like throwing it up some weird stuff. Like, all right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not a good sign if your starting center is the big penguin.
Penguins aren't
um,
known to be athletic creatures, I would say.
yeah. I think that he should get moved. I'd hope he gets moved. I would love to see Allen in the starting lineup with McGee. I think that just makes way more sense for them. And I want to see Garland and Sexton take even more of a usage rate. Stop giving the ball to Drummond. I think the Cavs want to move him and Love, but they're looking for the right opportunity. And I think it probably will come. But yeah, I'm excited to monitor this situation. Garland was out for a couple games, so they've lost a couple games. But I still think this team, now with Allen, it's a playoff team, baby. It's all the way.
Yeah, to grab a center who does everything you want him to do, and all you had to give up was what's probably going to be a late first round pick from Milwaukee in 2022. That's a no brainer for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that was a great move by the Cavs.
Yep. Okay. Finally, let's hit on, I don't know if you can call them the winners, but definitely a very active participant in this trade, the Houston Rockets. And I have the Houston Rockets roster up right now from NBA.com, and they have Karis LeVert on this team. So unless something went wrong and they're not telling us something we don't know, I'm pretty sure Oladipo's on this team.
Yeah, so LeVert has been like moved in theory. They just haven't. Neither of the teams have announced it yet. So right now, LeVert is on the Rockets. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, in general, I think initially what I was thinking is like what obviously everyone's saying is like, would you take Simmons? And apparently it was Simmons, Maxey, and 3 first was what the Rockets want, or like Simmons, Maxey, Tybal, and a first, or would you rather get what the Rockets have? Personally, I think you always take the asset. I mean, Simmons, all NBA third team and all defensive first team, like top 15 NBA player, top 5 defender in the league. You got to take that. I don't care how many picks you get. Like all of those picks, like we talked about, 4 of them aren't going to be good. So even if the next 4 are lottery picks, how sure are you that you're going to hit on it? Like it's really hard in the NBA to draft well. Like Tyler Hero went 13th, and I'm sure a lot of teams right now would give up way more than the 13th pick in the NBA draft to take Tyler Hero. So what it really comes down to for me about the Rockets is I feel like this once again has to do with Tillman Fertitta, their owner, and kind of his philosophy and how he wants to build his team. He's kind of been known to be like a really cheap guy. He doesn't want to pay. He's like worried about like how the pandemic's impacting his team, how he's leveraging a lot of businesses with the Rockets. He's losing money. He doesn't want to lose money. He doesn't want to pay people. And I think what it comes down to is Oladipo, you don't have to re-sign him, right? He's an expiring. You don't have to pay him if you don't want to. If he didn't play well, it's fine. Let him go. You don't want to give him any money. That's fine. Then Fertitta will be happy about that. And all those picks, all those are rookies that you'll have under control at like between 10 million and $3 million a year for like 4 or 5 years. And that is beautiful, I think, in Tillman Fertitta's mind. I don't think he necessarily wants to win a championship. I don't think that's his goal. I think contending is fine. I think that he probably thinks that he has a decent team, and he does have a decent team with Wall, Oladipo, Boogie, Woods. Like those are all good players. Probably should be contending for at least a play-in spot, right? And so I think he's more than happy. And I just wouldn't be surprised. Initially, my reaction was so the Sixers didn't offer Simmons because I think you take Simmons always. And then I thought about it and I was like, maybe the Sixers did offer Simmons, but the Rockets owner is just so cheap that he didn't care. Because you have to pay Simmons like 40 mil over the next 30 plus mil over the next 5 years. And maybe just don't want to commit himself to that, especially when you have John Wall on 40 for the next 2.
Yeah, so I think getting 8 first-round picks for Harden, especially when the entire league knew you were trading him, is pretty good. You know, you can probably expect that 4 out of 8 of those picks have like top 15 upside, should something happen with Brooklyn. And I think this team is not a bad team. The West is obviously really talented, so I think I would be a little bit surprised if they made the playoffs still. But getting Oladipo back, you have the potential here when if you put Oladipo onto this team that he could come back into that all-star form, at which point you'd have about $25 million in cap space next season that you could use to re-sign him, or you could just roll that over and figure out something else. John Wall has looked pretty good this season. I think Christian Wood is one of the best bargains in the NBA. He's making $13.6 million here, and he's playing really well. So
Yeah,
this
he's
team is
all-star level.
This is not a bad team at all, and I think there's a lot of upside with Oladipo. What I found most interesting about this trade is kind of the signs, the way that the Rockets kind of showed us some things about it. So the first thing is that Oladipo and 8 first-round picks is worth more to them than Simmons, right? We believe that Simmons was on the table at some point, so I think that kind of makes sense. You get half a season of Oladipo and 8 first-round picks is worth more than Simmons. I think that makes sense.
Like
Simmons
you would rather
quantity.
that? If you're trying to win a championship, would you rather do that? Because I don't think I would. I think I'd take Simmons every time.
I would take the picks because I think Simmons is at this point a known quantity. Simmons is 5th in the Sixers in scoring. I don't think there's any path to contention for the next 7 years with this team if you have Ben Simmons on the team. Because once you have Simmons on the team, your salary cap space is pretty much like locked up, until you get rid of John Wall. I think you probably have a better chance of getting a star from those 8 first-round picks than you do. I just think Simmons, we already know he can't be the number 1 player on a championship team. So now it's like you'd rather take the upside of what those picks could be rather than take someone who could be the second best player on a team, which is fine.
No. Even if I don't know if we know that Simmons can't be the best player on a championship team.
I'm telling you right now, he can.
I think it's hard to evaluate when he's playing with such a dominant center like Joel Embiid. But even if he can't, even if he's a 2 or a 3, I think you hope that one of the picks that you get gives you a Ben Simmons. I don't understand all this slander about Ben Simmons. I get that he's whatever, he doesn't score, but he, like I said, he's a top 15 NBA player. Do we think he's a top 15 NBA player, top 5 defensive player? There just literally isn't that many better players than him in the NBA. I think that if your only goal is to win, cap space, they could move on from, they have expirings in PJ Tucker. They could move on from Eric Gordon. He's an asset that can get moved. I think that if you really care about winning, you'd get Simmons. You're hoping one of the picks that you took will become Simmons. There's a very real chance. We've seen this happen over and over again, where the team trades for the picks and they all end up not working out. Like last year, where a couple years ago when the Celtics had the Grizzlies pick and everyone's like, oh, it's top 5 pick. The Grizzlies are going to be awful. They're going to be awful. And then it becomes the 14th pick, and then you miss out on Tyler Hero. And then you draft Aaron Nesmith at 14. And then you're looking at the Kings pick and you're like, oh, that didn't work out the way we thought it would. That's awful. And you're just kind of sitting there on these assets that you don't know what they're going to become. And even if you have the first pick, think about Markelle Fultz. They had Jason Tatum and they still drafted Fultz. It is so hard in the draft. Why not go for the known quantity, who was a really, really, really good NBA player?
I know what you're saying. So Ben Simmons, how old is Ben Simmons?
I think he's 24. I think that this proves that the Rockets don't want to win right now. And they don't want to win.
Well, because I think when you get Simmons, right? So if he's 24 now, then you have 5 to 6 years where he's in his prime. At that point, when you have Simmons, you're just not winning a championship with just Simmons. So you need another asset, right?
But
you need a score. You need something else. There's no real path to contention with Simmons in the West without another star player, without another top 10, top 15 player. You can't. You just can't get that. It's very hard for the Rockets to get that within the next 5 to 6 years without any first-round picks like that. Yeah. How are they going to get another top 15 NBA player with Simmons? And you need a player who's better than Simmons too, most likely, because Simmons doesn't really – he's not looking to shoot. watching Simmons this season, there are so many times where he doesn't even make himself a threat, and it drives me crazy. It's the same thing that Lonzo Ball does, where he will catch the ball and not like close to and not even look at the rim, not even pretend like he's going to shoot, not even drive it and make himself a threat. And that is like if he's going to be the best player on my team, I need him to be more of a scoring threat than deferring all these shots to Mike Scott.
I think
need him
scoring
to be
is the
more.
one thing they don't like. Scoring is
pretty important.
But you can find scoring. You can find scoring all over the NBA. Like, what do we say about players like Zach LaVine, or like all they can do is score? Like Simmons does literally everything else. If you took Simmons, you would have Simmons and Christian Wood. They're both pretty young and they're both really good players. Wood loves to score, right? Let's say you can't move off Wall because his contract's atrocious. He expires in 2 years. You would still have Simmons and Wood under contract and the cap space from John Wall, right? Like if you're so worried about, like, if you want to win and you're like, Simmons can't bring me to a championship this year. Well, in 2 years, you don't know who you'll be able to sign. And even like next year, you would be able to get someone like Oladipo still in free agency, right? Like,
yeah, that's not what player that could be available could be like a move the needle player. If you got Bradley Beal, that's a really good team. If you have Simmons and Bradley Beal and Christian Wood, that's not a championship team. So like if you
that's
go
a contending team.
It's a contending team. But in the West, that's not. Is that a top 4 team? Like,
okay, but maybe. For the next 5 years, we have no idea what's going to happen in the next 5 years. Like, you don't know who's going to become available and stuff. I mean,
if you just go down the list, there's not that many players that could be available. Like realistically,
but we know in the NBA this happens. Harden had 2 years left on his deal when he became available. Like, we know this is, like, that there's possibilities here. Like, I just feel like they just don't want to win. Like, that's what it comes down to. The Rockets don't care about winning as much as they do about their financial issues, or at least they care about their financial issues a lot more than their chances at winning. Because even though Ben Simmons might not lead you to a championship, there's no way that you could convince me that those 8 first-round picks would give them more success over the next 5 or 6 years than just having Ben Simmons. Okay. That just doesn't make any sense.
Let's go through the list. Let's go through the top 20 NBA players right now, and let's see, like, who could you put on that team with Simmons reasonably in the next 5 years that could actually make you a contender? I just pulled up this list from NBC Sports.
Okay.
Zion's not leaving the Pelicans. Chris Middleton, that doesn't move the needle for you championship-wise. Bradley Beal, not too bad. Rudy Gobert, not going to win you a championship. Paul George, not going to win you a championship. Westbrook, no. Tatum is most likely not leaving the Celtics. Karl-Anthony Towns, maybe. Probably not winning you a championship.
Karl-Anthony Towns would make them a championship team. That would make them a championship team. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
Jimmy Butler, no. Siakam, definitely not.
No. We're out of Siakam.
Lillard, I guess.
Yes.
Lillard
would make them a championship team.
Doncic is not leaving. Embiid, I guess, but we already saw that. Yeah. So no. Yeah. Jokic is not leaving. AD's not leaving.
But this is my whole point.
LeBron's not leaving. Kawhi, I guess Kawhi maybe, but Kawhi is kind of past the point in his career. I don't think there's a path for a championship team with Simmons, and then you don't really have that many assets after that. I think I would take the uncertainty of, hey, maybe these 8 first-round picks, maybe 2 of them are in the top 3. And I would take that over the known quantity of Simmons, when Simmons is a great NBA player.
Okay, but you
have to build a specific team around him for you to have a chance to win a championship. And it's just like, I'd rather have a blank slate than be trying to constantly fit a team around Simmons when we don't really know if he can win a championship.
Okay, but we also don't know what these picks are going to be. Like, when you trade for the picks, you're basically admitting to your fan base, we're going to be bad for the next 6 years. And they're just going to be okay with that. Like, that just really sucks, I think. And I think if you care about contending, like, there's something to be said about being a contending team. There has to be something to be said about that. Like, making the playoffs matters, and being like a top 3 seed, like being the Denver Nuggets matters, right? Like, they're a good team. Will they win a championship? Probably not. Like, as currently constructed, no. Like, Harden never won a championship with the Rockets, but people still say he had a successful 8-year run. Like, he made the conference finals, I think, like once or twice, but people still treat it like it was a great run because there's value to being a good franchise, right? Like, we saw Kawhi went to the Clippers because they were a a good franchise. The KD and Kyrie chose the Nets over the Knicks because they made the playoffs. Like that shouldn't matter. And we don't know like what the free agents are going to be in the next 5 or 6 years, what the storyline is going to be. If 2 years ago I told you that Harden, KD, and Kyrie would all be on the same team, you would not believe that. So we have no idea who's going to become available. I think that if you cared about winning and making a good franchise, you would trade for Simmons. But that's why I initially thought that Simmons wasn't on the table.
I understand that. I think there definitely is some merit to that you want to be a good team and you want to be in the conversation of, hey, like Houston is a decent franchise. They have some stability. Like why don't I go to Houston? Like I think it's an attractive NBA city overall. I don't believe in Simmons that much as being a championship piece. I think I would rather have the first overall. I think I'd probably rather take the package they have. And we're just going to disagree on that. So
Yeah, we're just gonna have to disagree on that. Okay. Well, besides that, yeah.
Other interesting things that I thought about the trade, I thought it was interesting that they seem to value Oladipo and a 2022 pick more than just getting LeVert and Allen, right? Because I'm sure the
Yeah.
LeVert, Allen, and the picks trade was on the table.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting that it seems like they don't value LeVert all that much if they would rather just have, half a season of Oladipo and then, I guess they're hoping that they re-sign him afterwards.
I don't
And then
think they
also
are.
that it kind of shows you how little centers are kind of valued in today's game a little bit.
Mhm.
Even like a good young center like Jared Allen, who I think is like exactly what you would want from an NBA center.
Mhm.
It got done for what's probably going to be a late first round pick, which I think is kind of interesting, a little bit weird, I guess. I think, is Jared Allen a little underrated or are we overrating him?
Yeah, I think that they probably don't want to resign Oladipo. This goes back to the whole conversation about their financial thing. Like, you just don't want to tie yourself down to 16 mil over 3 years with LeVert. Like, that's just what it comes down to. Um, yeah, I think we might be overrating him a little bit. Like we've seen success without like a true center, but I don't know. I think that like there's a very real possibility that in like 4 years, the only NBA like all-star left is Jared Allen from this deal, right? Like it's a very real possibility. Like 3 years, like we don't know how hard he's going to age. I don't know. I think that they probably looked at Allen where I guess they were just like, we don't want to pay him, so why are we going to keep him?
Yeah, I mean, I guess since you have Christian Wood, you could play Wood at the 4, but also Wood is kind of a perfect stretch 5 in today's game.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I understand that I guess you don't want to pay Jared Allen,
Hmm.
probably the same contract you gave Christian Wood, to
Yeah.
maybe be a bench player for them. So I understand that. I just thought it was interesting and something to
I
note.
agree.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Something to note for sure.
Yeah, I think in general, like there's a lot of moves to come. I was looking at kind of the pieces that I think will get moved. I think Eric Gordon's definitely on his way out, along with PJ Tucker. I just think that this team could be really bad if, like, they are really, really talented, but if a couple more pieces get moved, then they're really not that much better than the worst in the West. I was like watching the Timberwolves last night, and you kind of forget how good these teams are. Like, Cat and D'Lo are really, really good. Like Cat and D'Lo are better than Christian Wood and John Wall probably at this point. Um, and like even the Thunder, who are not a good team, not trying to win, like Shea is having an all-star season. So
And they have
like
veterans too, like George Hill, Horford. They know what to do on
yeah.
the court, and like that's not a bad team. Dort and
Mhm.
Diallo give you some like energy, and they're kind of
Yeah.
intriguing pieces. They're going to try hard every night. That's not a
Mhm.
team that's trying to lose.
Mhm.
With the players on the roster are going to play hard every night, and they're going to make it a challenge for you. So
Yeah. And so like the Rockets, like moving on, Eric Gordon's like I think 4 years also at 16 million, and I was kind of looking at potential trade partners like Philadelphia didn't really work out. The contracts didn't work. And like teams always need shooting, so I'm sure he'll get moved for like an expiring and a pick. But yeah, like this team could someone's got to be the worst team in the NBA, or at least in the West, and this team is starting to become in contention for that.
yeah, I think the only thing about the Rockets is I don't see much of a reason for them to bottom out, if that makes sense, because John Wall's contract is probably not movable.
No,
I don't think you would want to trade Christian Wood unless you're getting something really
no.
good back, but I think you probably keep Christian Wood. So then it's kind of like the smaller pieces. Um, Boogie Cousins on a veteran's minimum is like it's almost like, I guess, unless you can get something of real value back for that, which I'm
No.
not sure you would, because I think most people are probably just going to look to the buyout market to get
Maybe
a
the
center
Nets.
rather than Boogie Cousins. So um, I don't think I don't know if there's the incentive there to really bottom out, but there is kind of like, there aren't a lot of teams who are trying to lose this season. So, there might be some merit in just bottoming out, and like it could be easier path to getting into the top 3 of the draft than
Yeah.
people could think.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like the 2021 pick swap, obviously, like that's in their favor. I don't know. Yeah, it's just like this roster is very thin past their
Yeah, it
starting
is.
lineup.
It
We're
is.
looking at Bruno
Um,
Caboclo, Chris Clemens. Yeah, it's tough.
Overall, though, I think this trade works out for all 4 teams involved. I think the teams will probably look back on it, unless the net situation is just a disaster, and it has the potential to be really bad
Oh yeah, I'm
in
kind
the
of
end of the
nervous.
years. But besides that, I think all 4 teams are probably pretty happy with what happened, the pieces they got back at this point.
Hmm.
So I think it'll be really interesting to see how this works out and who ends up becoming the quote unquote winner of this. But I think this deal has the potential to work out for 3 out of 4, maybe 4 out of the 4 teams.
Yeah, I agree. I think this could be a win-win-win-win trade for sure. Yeah, I'm biased. I think that the Cavs just made a great move here. They gave up literally nothing to get a real player. So I'm hoping we see some Andre Drummond trade, or maybe even like a Larry Nance or something, just to open up the minutes for Jared Allen in the next coming days. But yeah, I think in general, a successful trade for every team involved.
And I'm really excited to see what the Rockets look like with Oladipo, because I think that's kind of a cool team.
Yeah,
Like to have Wall and Oladipo and Boogie Cousins, like it's kind of like the 2017 All Stars.
yeah, for
And
sure.
then
Yeah,
watching Harden, Durant, and if Kyrie ever comes back is just going to be like, that's an amazing team to watch. Like how
yeah.
individually talented all those players are. So I'm
Hmm.
excited to watch some basketball.
Yeah, me too. All right. So I guess that's going to be the end of our pod. Thanks for listening, and we'll be continuing to upload videos as the story breaks on. All right. See you.